Hey folks, I felt like I was dressed appropriately for this lecture, so I wanted to kind of record this one today. On the first day of my in-person classes, I wear a lot of silly suits, and this is my DC comic suit, and so that works for what we're talking about today. A thing. Throughout the history of the United States, we engage in a lot of what are called moral panics. We sort of freak out about various things. We've already talked about one, the corruption of young women, and the incorrect belief that there was an absolutely massive epidemic of trafficking in young American women. Yes, that was happening to a small degree, but the way that it was portrayed, especially by politicians, it absolutely was not going on anywhere near that level. And so moral panics are these kind of, yes, there might be an issue, but we are going to blow it way out of proportion. So, and in post World War II America, we are going to have multiple moral panics, but one of the big ones revolves around comic books. And today, in 2026, we are very much freaked out regularly about, media that is consumed by young people. The one over the last probably 30 years, especially, is violent video games. We have this weird belief that violent video games make people violent. That really doesn't work. I played a whole lot of violent video games. I've played a whole lot of Grand Theft Auto. I've yet to steal a car. It's not working on me. Maybe I'm messed up and Grand Theft Auto hasn't corrupted me, but I just don't think that's the case. So in post World War II United States, though, there was a big concern about juvenile delinquency. And we're in the middle of one of these things now. These young people are going amok and they're doing all kinds of crazy things, and nobody wants to work anymore. We hear that garbage today, and it's garbage. It's just, stupid people that freak out about everything. Well, in post World War II America, there was a concern about juvenile delinquency, but there was also at the same time a concern about minor criminality. So lots of young people, but also kind of a little bit older adults were committing lots and lots of minor crimes. There was also a lot of concern about homelessness. And we have concerns about homelessness in the United States today, and these get really blown out of proportion by politicians. I'm not saying that there's not a really serious homeless problem. Politicians tend to use these problems for political gain, is what I'm saying there. And so in New York especially during this time, there's problems with homelessness and there's problems with minor criminality. And so politicians are going to play that up, that, oh my gosh, society is breaking down, everything is awful, and we need to do something about it. Well, 4 young people, a 18-year-old, 2 17-year-olds, and a 15-year-old, decided they're going to take it upon themselves to help the police and to help the political administration clean this all up. And so these 4 young people are listening to this political rhetoric, and homeless people are bad, minor criminals are bad, society is crumbling, and they decide to take it upon themselves, and they're going to go out and help the police and the politician to clean stuff up. So they go out in the evenings and they start beating up homeless people. This will help the situation, right? So they go out and they start beating up homeless people. They do that, and then it escalates, and they beat one of them to death. So these four, kids, 18-year-old, two 17-year-olds, and a 15-year-old, go out and they beat a homeless person literally to death. And while they're engaging and escalating, they also get another homeless person and they threw him in the East River, and he drowned. And so with this escalation, they're going to be easily caught, and so the police arrest these four kids, and they start echoing a lot of the stuff that the politicians are saying. That the politicians were saying that the homeless people and these folks were social parasites, and these kids echo that in their interviews. They literally were calling homeless people social parasites. They also confessed that they were concerned about the moral direction of the country, and in the picture there on the newspaper, you can see the guy, one of the guys sitting there in the suit holding something up. He's holding up a riding crop, a small horsewhip. Because one of the things that these four young guys did was that they saw a couple of women out in the park really, really late at night, didn't think they should be there, and so they horsewhipped these two women for being in the park too late because they felt like they shouldn't be there. They also admitted during their interview with the police that they poured gasoline on another homeless person and set him on fire. Now the press, like you see with the Brooklyn Eagle here, calls these kids the Brooklyn Thrill Killers. And during the interrogation, one of the things that comes out that two of the kids admitted was that, especially the leader, two of the kids admitted that they had been reading a lot of comic books. And the this is the cops, this is the government. They're not going to want to say that, hey, we as politicians and authority figures were throwing this rhetoric out there and that's what these kids acted on. No, let's blame it on something else. And so the authorities start blaming this on these comic books that these kids were reading. Comic books at the time had a lot of true crime stuff and a lot of kind of horror kind of genre to it. And so they blame it on these comic books. It's definitely not the politicians that are throwing this violent rhetoric that homeless people are social parasites. And what do you do with parasites? You kill parasites, right? Well, they're not going to blame themselves, so they blame the comic books. And so during their trial, as well as later testifying before Congress, a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists prescribe medication. Psychologists usually do talk therapy. A psychiatrist decides to explore this issue, and he writes, the psychiatrist is Frederick Wertham. He writes a book called The Seduction of the Innocent, and it's about the harmful impact of comic books on young people. He claimed in Seduction of the Innocent that comic books definitely corrupted young people and caused all kinds of problems, very much in the same vein that we hear today. Violent video games, Grand Theft Auto, causes young people to commit lots and lots of violent crimes. Again, I played a lot of Grand Theft Auto. I became a history professor. My brother played a lot of Grand Theft Auto. He became a medical doctor. So, violent video games can make you go to grad school. And yeah, that's scary. So Wertham, though, made lots and lots and lots of claims, and a lot of them are absolutely silly. One of them, I don't know if he accidentally fell on this, but it's kind of interesting. But one of them actually does ring true, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But here are some of the claims that Wertham argues that comic books are doing. and you hear a lot of this nonsense today of other art forms. Batman and Robin, man. Batman and Robin, two dudes living together. Wortham argued that Batman and Robin promoted homosexuality. Like what? He also argued that Superman is un-American and fascist. Again, what? Like, now Superman's not from the United States. He's from Krypton. He's from another planet. So he illegally immigrated to the United States. So maybe he's not American, but he can promote American values and stuff. And that's what happens in the comics. I don't know where Wortham got that. Now, this one's the interesting one. And I don't know if Wortham knew this or just made this kind of argument. But Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman promoted bondage. She's got the magic lasso. She ties people up and they're forced to tell the truth with the magic lasso. Here's the cool thing about that. All right. So Wonder Woman's creator is a guy named William Marston. Marston was a psychologist. And kind of cool, Marston developed the lie detector machine, which doesn't really work, but it does pick up on, physical, cues and stuff that, you might be more nervous, you might sweat more, your heart rate might go up and stuff when you're lying. But Marston developed the lie detector machine and used that as the inspiration for Wonder Woman's magic lasso. Also really, really kind of cool. And Frederick Wortham, the psychiatrist guy, does not explore this. He doesn't argue this. But Marston also was in a polyamorous throuple. He was married to his wife, and then they brought in this other woman into their relationship. And all three of them were at some point, yes, into some bondage kind of stuff. Really kind of neat that I find sort of neat. Marston and this woman were legally married, his wife. But when they brought in the other woman, they asked her, we can't legally get married, but would you like us to get you a wedding ring, to just sort of as a symbol of our commitment to each other? And she said no, she didn't want a wedding ring. She wanted 2 gold bracelets to symbolize that she was connected to both William Marston and his, legal wife. I can't remember her name, unfortunately. But she wanted 2 golden bracelets to symbolize her connection and commitment to them. And those golden bracelets are, inspired Wonder Woman's bulletproof golden bracelets. Kind of cool. Wortham also argued, and again, getting into weird areas, Wonder Woman promoted lesbianism and was a lesbian because she was strong. Again, what? But the American public, human beings are stupid. And the American public bought into this and very, very much believed that comics were causing problems. They were leading to moral delinquency and stuff like that. And various communities will hold book burnings of comic books during the 1950s. So they'll send out actually school kids that are being influenced by their parents that comic books are bad, but they'll send out school kids to go out and collect comic books in the communities, and then they have these big comic book burnings, which is the comic books of the 1950s are worth a lot of money, in part because they're rare, and in part because kids read them and messed them up and stuff and didn't kind of keep them mint condition, but also probably caught a lot of them on fire. But First Amendment problems, Oklahoma City and Houston, those cities passed ordinances to ban horror and crime comic books. They're not wanting to corrupt the youth of the area. Now, we see this later in the semester with music. We didn't talk about it, but around this, a little bit before this time, actually, we see this with Hollywood, with the motion picture industry, with the motion picture rating system. R ratings, PG, and G ratings. But Congress, the United States Congress, holds hearings about the risk of comic books. And they did the same thing with movies. They'll do the same thing in the 1980s with music. But in the 1950s and 60s, Congress holds hearings about, the threat of comic books. And if comic books are going to lead to increased crime or moral delinquency and stuff like that. And Frederick Wortham testifies on the side that comics do actually cause harm. On the other side of that, and I'm not related to this dude, but it would be holy cow super cool if I was, William Gaines was the publisher of EC Comics. And he also testified before Congress in defense of comic books. EC Comics didn't really run a lot of superhero comics. They ran a lot of true crime comics as well as horror comics. So a lot of ghosts and monsters and stuff like that. And ultimately, probably in large part, based on William Gaines's testimony, Congress did not pursue censoring comic books. So Congress votes to leave comic books alone. They're not going to get involved in censoring them. But we saw the same thing. We didn't do a lecture on this, but United States history, we saw the same thing with the motion picture industry. Congress had hearings on the harmful impact of movies and elected not to regulate the movie industry, but the movie industry decided to regulate itself. And so the movie industry itself creates the rating system and stuff like that. Well, the comic book publication world decides to regulate itself. And their logic is, if we regulate ourselves, then Congress will not get involved in trying to regulate us. And so the comic book publishing industry creates something called the Comics Code Authority. And the Comics Code Authority is going to regulate what you can write and what you can illustrate in your comic books. They put this out in 1954. And here's the thing. You, as a comic book publisher, do not have to abide by this. You don't have to. You can do what you want. But if you don't abide by this, you can't get hooked into the distribution network of the comic book publishers. You also will not be able to be sold. Your comic books will not be able to be sold at mainstream comic book shops. And so you can write and you can illustrate whatever the heck you want, but you're not going to be able to get it to market realistically. Or if you do, it's a very, very tiny market and you get to sell 5 books, right? So if you want to make money and you want to gain large readership, you have to do this. So it's free to be involved with, like you can elect not to be involved with, but you're not going to sell comic books, widely if you do. So in 1954, every major comic book publishing house is going to get on with the Comics Code Authority. And what happens is you print your comic book and you submit it to the Comics Code Authority. Somebody there reads it and will approve it or reject it, and then you've got to make changes, and then they'll put that little seal somewhere on the front of the cover so that everybody knows it's been approved by the Comics Code Authority. Some of the requirements, and you don't have to get these down, but just kind of get a sense of these are the really, really stringent sort of stuff. And there's about 20 of these. I've boiled them down to the ones that I find personally most important. So if crime is depicted, it shall be as sordid and unpleasant. So in comic book land, you can't present any good reason to commit a crime. There's absolutely no good reason to commit a crime. If a kid is starving and they steal a piece of bread, that's bad. It's all bad. It's a crime. It's bad. All crime is sordid and unpleasant. So there's no justification, according to the Comics Code Authority, to commit any sorts of crime. Policemen, judges, etc., shall never be presented in such a way as to create disrespect for established authority. So all cops, every single one of them is good. All judges, every single one of them is good. You cannot question them. You cannot ever present corrupt cops. You cannot ever present cops that have strayed or did something terrible. Same thing with judges. All governmental authority is good and should be respected. Like, I don't know if you live in the real world, but that's not reality, right? So, this one is going to kill the horror genre. No Walking Dead, no tortures, no torture, no vampires or vampirism. Ghouls, cannibals, and werewolfism are prohibited. So you get rid of the entirety of the horror genre. A lot of the EC comics, that's, Vault of Horror, Tales from the Crypt, all that kind of stuff. That's gone. This one is also kind of funny because one of the earlier female comic book writers in the 1960s, I think, was a lady named Mary Wolfman. And because the Comics Code Authority says no werewolfism, Mary Wolfman had a problem getting her name printed on the front of comics, even though she's the author of some of them. No nudity and no profanity. So that's the case in 1954. Something kind of cool during the 1970s, we see a lot of questioning of authority, and we see sort of like, hey, maybe there's some rationale sometimes to commit crimes, stuff like that. And so in 1971, you see them loosening up a little bit, and you see this in movies too. Think about like Smokey and the Bandit, those kind of movies where we see this sort of the anti-hero fighting against corrupt cops, or at least overbearing cops in the case of Smokey and the Bandit. But some criminals can be sympathetic. So there's, that kid that's stealing some bread to try to feed himself. That's, yes, that's a crime, but we kind of understand why he might be doing it. Some cops and judges can be corrupt. In the 1970s, we see a lot of movies like that, definitely. We also kind of realize in the 1970s that, yeah, some cops and judges and government officials are bad people. They've managed to get themselves into these positions of power. That doesn't mean they're just going to turn into good people overnight. They were bad to begin with. They just managed to get themselves into bad situations. Drugs can exist, but are always bad. And so it's going to present a really negative light on all sorts of drug use. That gets relaxed a little bit in the late 70s and in the early 80s. One of, you don't have to write this down, but one of Green Arrow's sidekicks, a character named Speedy, which is ironic, gets hooked on heroin in one of the issues. And the issue is really good. It explores Speedy's addiction, and they try to get him help and stuff like that. And so it's kind of good in exploring addiction issues and things. So that sticks from 1954 when it gets put into place until about the year 2000. A little bit before the year 2000, there were a couple of new publishing houses. Image Comics was one, if you've ever read Spawn comics. Image Comics was one that just didn't go by the Comics Code Authority at all. They never had. So there wasn't much of a change for them, but they were new. But in the year 2000, you don't have to remember what title it is, but Marvel Comics accidentally, this was an accident, they didn't do it on purpose as far as we know, but Marvel Comics accidentally did not submit a copy of X-Force to the Comics Code Authority. X-Force is a subgroup of the X-Men. But they accidentally didn't send a copy of X-Force to the Comics Code Authority, and instead they sent it directly to the distributors to ship out to the comics shops. And nothing happened. Like, it went out to distributors and it went out to the comic book shops and it sold, and the world didn't end. And a bunch of kids, a bunch of kids that are reading comic books tend to not be really the most hardcore criminal kind of mindset, but they didn't go out robbing banks and crazy stuff like that. And so Marvel stopped submitting after that. I think it took maybe a year or so, but Marvel just, why are we paying for this service? Why are we being beholden to this? And so Marvel stopped submitting. The other publishing houses, DC Comics, they also stopped submitting around that same time after nothing happens with Marvel. And by 2010, so it took about 10 years, but by 2010, absolutely none of the comic book publishers were submitting anything to the Comics Code Authority. And so the code in 2010 became defunct. Nobody's submitting any comics for approval or anything. They're just going directly to the distributors and directly to the shops. And so if you go buy comics today, Comics Code Authority is not, you're not going to see that. Around the same time, one of my favorite kind of responses to this is that Archie Comics, and if you've ever read Archie Comics, it's Archie and Betty and Veronica and Jughead and Moose, and they're all just a bunch of high school kids. They, there's nothing really going on in the community of Riverdale. They date, a lot of it's Archie is like dating Betty and Veronica, and they're kind of vying for him and stuff. That's all it is. It's high school life. But the Archie, the editor, I guess, the editor of Archie Comics, let it be known that they were no longer going to submit to the Comics Code Authority. But he said it's not going to change the way that we write comics. And this is the great line. He said, it's not like we're going to start sticking bodies in refrigerators. So, a common sort of trope is, after a murder, you shove the body in a refrigerator. He was saying that Archie Comics wasn't going to change anything just because they weren't going to this kind of, censorship approval house and stuff like that. Something really kind of cool. In 2011, after the Comics Code Authority becomes completely defunct, in 2011, a First Amendment group, the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. Comic Book Legal Defense Fund is a First Amendment group, but they just handle comic book issues. They bought the rights to the logo for the Comics Code Authority, and they use the logo in all of their work and stuff now. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of run through that. I really enjoy reading comic books. I'm wearing my DC suit today, and so I wanted to kind of jump on this one. So we'll see you next time.